Hello, my friends, and welcome to What's Up. It's half an hour where Gregg, Braden, and I get together and just chat like we used to in the cars coming from the airport from Dulles out here to Berkeley Springs in West Virginia. And we thought we'd do this on kind of a regular basis and just let lots of other people kind of listen in on the kind of conversations we had. Hi, Gregg. Nice to have you.
Hey, John, it's good to see you. And I am going to be in your part of the world for our transitions talk in August. So we're going to have one of
Yeah,
those actual car trips. We'll have to have maybe a GoPro camera in there so we can record it. That'd be fun.
yeah. Well, what we'll probably try to do is to do an episode of What's Up. We'll tape it there in the public and have kind of a studio audience, and so we'll have people will get a chance to see how we do all of this. But you know what I thought we'd put on the table here to see what you had to think about is this whole WHO treaty that's they're trying to sneak in.
Right.
There's this. The World Health Organization, which is a component of the United Nations, has been working on for a number of years some kind of almost you could call it a universal health or a pandemic oriented kind of treaty that they hope to get every country, essentially every country in the world, to sign on to. And what they want is, and the essence of this treaty is that the World Health Organization, in the case of a pandemic, or it's not just a pandemic, it's kind of an emergency, a health emergency. And of course, they get to choose and decide if it's a health emergency or whether it qualifies. But once that happens, then the World Health Organization then becomes the authority for the planet on the kind of responses and reactions and interventions and such. That is to say that it takes the sovereignty away from individual countries and suddenly gives it to this unelected kind of organization over in Switzerland, and whose objectives are suspect at best in light of the kind of experience that we've had for the last couple of years. Now, in this country, treaties are negotiated by the executive branch, by the president, but they're ratified by the Senate. And so you would think at face value that a treaty that gave up the sovereignty of a country like the United States to an unelected organization, non-governmental organization even, over in Switzerland, would be heavily, opposed by the politicians and the Congress. That turns out to be the case, that quite a movement is rising on the Republican side, particularly against this, because the way that they have designed this treaty is that it becomes once the president signs the treaty, it is tentative but in place and operative until that point in which the Congress would ratify it, which is to say that you would immediately, and this is legal and binding, you would immediately, upon the time that the President Biden would sign this, that suddenly the well-being of the United States and its citizens are being decided from somewhere else in the world by unelected people whose interests are not necessarily at all what ours are.
There is a precedent for this, and the precedent is that the same thing has happened with the climate agreement. So the United Nations held the climate summits. We can go back. There was one in 1995, another one in 2000, 2014. We had the Millennial Development Goals, the UN SDG 2030s, all came out of these. And what happened was 190 some odd nations agreed, but they are not binding at that time. They weren't binding because they were never ratified by the US Congress. So what has changed, and where this has gotten really interesting and really got my attention, the driving force behind a lot of this is what we're all talking about, hearing about, the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos, Switzerland, once a year. Unelected officials, representatives of nations. So we've got leaders of state, we've got technological leaders, we've got political leaders, we've got spiritual leaders. I was surprised to see some of the spiritual leaders that were so-called spiritual leaders. So they've always had these pretty radical ideas. I didn't pay much attention to them because they had no teeth. There was no way to enforce them. And where that changed is in the year 2019, very publicly, what I'm going to say is no secret, they formally signed an agreement with the United Nations for the UN to implement much of the vision of the World Economic Forum, and to do it through what is called the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, UN SDG 2030. So now the UN is becoming the implementation arm of the vision of these unelected officials. And it's a vision for a world that I know that you don't want it and I don't want it. Most people, when they understand what's happening, they don't want it. And so now you look at the fine print, you look at the details. What are they proposing to do? Well, they announced, they released the minutes from their meeting at the last month, at the end of the 23 meeting in Davos. And what they hope to do, they are certain we are on track for another pandemic. And they predict, their models predict that it will be in 2024. So what they want to do is have the political infrastructure in place in 23 so that 24, they don't get the pushback that they got for their policies that they got in 2020.
Any number of other institutions around the world has taken on quite a different direction and a different kind of color in the last 20, 25 years that just is really calls into question, who again has orchestrated and what is driving this thing in such an organized and sophisticated way.
So the best thing we can do, we're in it. We're in a change. The only way out of it is to go through it. If we want to go through it with a soft landing rather than a hard landing, we've got to be the best version of ourselves. And one of the ways to do that is personal responsibility. I'm just going to invite my brothers and sisters, my global family out there. We love you all. Please get as healthy as you can, because that is going to be the most foundational thing. Thank you for opening the door to this conversation today. It was unscripted. I had no idea what we were going to talk about. And it was a good conversation. Thank you.
And we'll come back and we'll do it again in a couple of weeks. And so for those of you who are watching this, we hope that you'll, stay tuned. Come back again in a couple of weeks and we'll do another What's Up. And I'll ask Gregg, Braden, what's up? And we will run off and chat about whatever's on our mind for the next kind of half hour. And so thank you. And we're happy to come to you from the Arlington Institute here in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. Take care.
Thanks so much.